Hi, I'm Tom Walsh. I'm the State Representative from Peabody. I represent Wards 1 through 4 and Ward 5, Precincts 1 and 3 in Peabody. And just wanted to take the opportunity to say hello and talk about a few things going on at the state level. It's been, I'd say at least a year since we did one of these little informative shows. And I know it's been a difficult year for everybody. Very unusual with the pandemic and people working from home or losing their job and or temporarily being out of work, kids home and studying remotely. It's just been a different world, and so I just thought it was important that we take a few minutes, recognize the challenges that we've had this last year, and really acknowledge the opportunities that are facing us as we move ahead this year. I guess I'd like to start very quickly just talking about the budget, just very quickly. We are in the process in the House. During the month of April, we will debate the proposed $46 billion Massachusetts budget. And once we have debated and adopted our version of the budget, it will then move over to the Massachusetts Senate. They will do their work mostly during the month of May. And hopefully before Memorial Day, they will have adopted their version of the budget. Then, as usual, you have a conference committee where members get together, a small group of people working out the differences between the House version and the Senate version, and the goal is to have a fiscal 22 budget in place by June 30th as the new fiscal year begins on July 1st. A couple things in that budget that I think are important are we are at least level funding, if not increasing local aid. We've been trying to do that the last several years. School funding as well. And we also have to look this year at the federal government has been a little bit helpful as far as sending some money to the districts. And we had a discussion recently with members of one of the labor councils on the North Shore about what our priorities are, how we should spend that money. And the one thing I did caution everybody on is that money is a one-time appropriation to states and to communities, and we have to be very careful how that money is spent. I think it should be spent on one-time things. When we look at our schools, if there's a way to improve some of the infrastructure within the building itself, that's a better way to do that than taking the money and trying to do something in the operational budget, because a year from now that money will not be available. So we need to be very, very cautious in how we handle that. We have faced some unique challenges. We probably have had the highest volume of constituent requests that we've had in the last 5 years since I returned to the State House. Unemployment is probably our number one issue right now, and it's mostly people trying to get through the system, how they access the website, how they get their forms filled out, and then what the process is as far as them receiving their benefits. There have been a few cases that have been more challenging than others, and we try to facilitate, because we are not the unemployment office and we don't make the decisions on whether somebody is qualified or not. What we can do is try to get them through. We are really a facilitator, is the best way to describe that. Housing. We used to say, I think if you saw any of my earlier shows, I would always tell you that housing was probably our number one issue. It still is in many cases. I think in the next year or two, we're going to have some real unique challenges in that we have had the moratorium on evictions. That was at the state level for a while. There still is the federal moratorium. And at some point, that is all going to have to be dealt with. There's a lot of mediation going on right now where some of those issues are trying to be resolved. But unfortunately, in Massachusetts and in the North Shore area too, we have a real shortage of housing. And if you look at the median price of a home in Peabody right now, I think it's somewhere just shy of $500,000. I think it's somewhere around $477,000 for a single family home. In the last 10 years, the increase in home values in Peabody alone has been about 52%. So that's pretty significant. And what I'm concerned about is we have a generation of our own children that we want to make sure stay close, and we need to have affordable housing for them so that they can stay here. The other side of that, and we've talked about this before, is that I caution retirees sometimes who decide that they want to sell their home because they don't want the upkeep and they move into an apartment oftentimes they move into a complex that the rent increases fairly frequently. Once they're legally allowed to raise that rent, they do. And unfortunately, someone's pension doesn't keep up with that. And then they're looking to relocate, and the housing stock is very limited and their choices are very limited. And sometimes we lose them from the area because of that. So one of the other issues with housing is something that we were able to work with the Mayor's office, Mayor Betancourt, the City Council, Pete McGinn, Ann Manning, many of the other councilors, and Senator Lovely's office, former Representative Ted Speliotis, and working with DHCD, Massachusetts Housing, is making sure that the Crown and Shield buildings, the tannery as we would know it, stayed on as market rate or below market rate affordable housing, because there were roughly somewhere around 240 units that would have gone off what counts towards that 10% of below market housing stock. And so working together, state and local officials, we were able to work with Wind Development, who received the contract, and is working hard now to rehabilitate many of the apartments and working with the residents to try to make sure that they have a quality place to live. So that's incredibly important. It's not just new houses, not single home buildings, but it's some of our converted tanneries from years past that now serve as housing for our residents. One of the other things that's occurred since we last spoke was my committee assignments. Last year, probably one of the busiest committees that I served on was the Education Committee, where we worked on the Student Opportunity Act, where we set the goals for the next 7 years or so on how we're going to fund education at the secondary level. This year, I have the honor of having been appointed as chairman of the Ethics Committee. The difficulty of that job is, or the challenge I should say, is my job is to make sure that my own members within the House of Representatives don't end up violating any of our rules or regulations. So it's a job that is incredibly serious. It's a job that's very private. It's kind of like human resources in many respects, where we just want to make sure that everybody stays within regulation, and so that we don't have any problems. So we are looking at right now some things, working with the Ethics Commission and our House Counsel, looking at what we're going to do related to social media and how that all, the world has changed, so we have to change with it and make sure that we stay within the proper guidelines. And beyond just my chairmanship, the legislative filing deadline has passed a month or so ago, and several bills that I filed that I think are of importance not only to Peabody but to the Commonwealth. One is a deceptive practices when it comes to phone calls. It is, I think we've all gotten either a phone call at home that it looks like it's somebody like, oh gee, Tom Walsh is calling me. It turns out it is not. It's somebody using a local number and somebody's name for deceptive practices, and we're trying to get a real handle on that and make sure that we outlaw that, and that the penalties for that are significant. The other thing, and I think a lot of people have gotten, is a text, and it looks like it's from one of your friends, and it's not. So we would require that the phone number is traceable back to an individual. We would require that if they are calling people in Massachusetts, that the area code has to be from Massachusetts, either 508 or 617. And the other piece of that is that they physically have to have a presence in Massachusetts, so that you can't be from Alabama or California or anywhere else using a local area code and putting yourself out there as somebody that you're not. And really it's a way to protect our consumers, our neighbors, because I think we've all been annoyed by some of those phone calls, and it's just not right. Another piece of legislation that I have refiled this year is the human trafficking legislation. And basically what that does is, as Senator Lovely and Representative Kearns have signed on with me in this bill, and what it would do is it would require hoteliers and motel owners to be trained in the signs of human trafficking. Because what we learned, and I learned this from police officers here in Peabody, is that there really is a network that runs from Florida up to the Canadian border on the 95 corridor. moving people along in the human trafficking industry. And it's very, very, very sad what they're doing, exploiting young girls, young women. So there are certain signs, there is certain language that they use. And if we could train our hoteliers and staff to recognize those signs and to provide a number for them to call to report any incidents or any suspicions of that, we think that we could curtail a little bit. We won't stop it, unfortunately, but I think we can curtail it. Last year, we had a couple of our police sergeants here in Peabody come and testify on the bill. We had several other organizations testify. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic and the way the whole year went, a lot of focus was on protecting people who were out of work, healthcare issues, so that we I think some of the things that really we had hoped would be dealt with kind of got pushed aside a little bit, and we're now refocusing on those issues, and that's one of them. Another bill that I had filed that we'll work on a little bit more this year is critical incident when it comes to school safety, and making sure that our police are well versed in what each building looks like, and that people are trained in case of some type of incident. We have fire drills. They're required I believe it's 4 every year that are required, and we would like something similar just so people are aware where the exits are, what to do in case there was some type of other emergency. So we'll work on that this year as well. One of the other issues that we're working on is I'm working on with DHCD and others, trying to put together a first-time homebuyer's Bill of Rights. And really what we want to do, especially in this market, as we've talked about before, is because the housing market is so tight, a lot of times what people are doing is they're either skipping the home inspection, or they're bidding on property, or getting mortgages that maybe they don't necessarily fit into. We just want to make sure that they understand their rights and what recourse they have if something doesn't work out. So this is kind of in flux a little bit. We're working with the professionals in the industry to try to get something that we think will protect the consumer, and also the person selling the home, so that there's no coming back on them. We're not trying to re-regulate banks or over-regulate realtors or anybody else. What we're trying to do is get everybody in the industry to agree that these are the things that a first-time home buyer should know, and it is really for their protection. One of the other issues that we've talked a lot about, and you've probably seen the progress along Route 128, is the Waters River Bridge project, which is, as I've talked before, Waters River Bridge itself, the Waters River is in Danvers, but the residents who were probably most impacted by this construction project were those on Tammy Lane on the southbound side, and the residents of the Esquire Drive, Canterbury, Wiseman Drive neighborhood on the northbound side. We were able to work with MassDOT, and as the project proceeds, you'll see that we have a sound barrier that has already been constructed and is near completion on the southbound side, and that will protect the noise, because what happened is they're making the lane from Endicott Street in Danvers to the Route 114 ramp in Peabody on the southbound side. It's an acceleration lane coming out of Danvers, and then a deceleration lane as you exit onto Route 114 westbound. So because they have kind of encroached on that neighborhood a little bit by widening the highway, we were able to get a sound barrier because they qualify because of the decibel level. And it really protects that neighborhood from noise. The same thing on the Esquire Drive northbound side. That, as you can see, the pilings have been set, and they're working on that. Sometimes you'll see that the exit ramp from Andover Street onto Route 128 northbound many days is closed, and that's while they do this construction. We're hoping, they're telling us it's a couple more years, but we're optimistic that they're a little bit ahead of schedule. That depends a lot on weather, but it's an important project for this area. Repaving Centennial Drive down to right beyond the North Shore Mall, which is not part of the Waters River Bridge project, will commence. So it will be a little bit of an inconvenience short term. Also working with MassDOT and District 4, which is this region, and trying to figure out some solution for that ramp at Route 128 at Lowell Street trying to get onto 128 southbound. Because people stop at the top and they back up the ramp and it backs onto Lowell Street. We were successful a year or so ago when we had a temporary sign that, the board that suggested people keep moving along. So we're looking at options to see how we can better facilitate the traffic flow there. The problem is you can't widen the highway. So looking at that and trying to do things safely. One of the other things, it's not necessarily a decision by the legislature, but everybody last year filled out their census, and it's the federal census that is done every 10 years. And the importance of that and the importance of having people respond to it is that it affects what we get for federal dollars, it affects our representation, it affects the services that we receive as a community. So by the end of April, I believe that they will have the numbers, they will have pretty strong figures on what we have, and then in September they will kind of let us know what that's going to mean for redistricting. It does affect communities as far as, or states as far as congressional representation. The dollars that we get, the federal dollars, it all goes back to that. Peabody, it will be interesting to see. I think back in 2010 we had a population of somewhere around 51,000, maybe a little bit more than that. And the most recent estimate, I believe in 2019, had us just above 53,000 residents. And I think that you'll see that with this census, it probably has grown a little bit more. But again, there are different strata, I guess, of cities and towns as far as population and what that means for our reimbursements by the federal level, at the federal level. Okay, so as we move forward, you know, the next couple months are critical as far as the vaccine rollout. You know, the goal is that somewhere after April 19th that everybody over 16 will be eligible to receive a vaccine. The percentages are increasing daily on how many people are fully vaccinated and how many people have received their first vaccination. My understanding is that by mid to late April, according to federal reports, that about 90%, there will be a 90% availability of vaccine for residents, so that as we move into the summer months, I am hopeful that we can move on from the challenges that we've had in the last year and then start addressing some of the things, you know, that we need to address, some of it legislatively, but also there's another part of this that I'm incredibly optimistic about, and that we're already seeing it. We're noticing that travel is picking up a little bit. Reservations are starting to increase at local hotels and motels, and restaurants are starting to open. At least we have outside dining that is increasing. I like outside dining. I hope it's here to stay. I love it, but that's me personally. But there are tourist dollars that come into this region. It's not just a Salem issue or a North Shore issue. Peabody benefits from it as well. We have several hotels in the area, and we benefit from the hotel tax. There is a piece of that that goes to the city of Peabody, and then the state obviously receives revenue from that as well. So the sooner we can get bookings, then the revenue that we receive then goes to paving our streets, educating our children, providing our services to our veterans and our seniors. So I'm anxious for that to move forward. But also there's really the mental health and the anxiety issue. People are just so done with being inside, and you can see it as the weather warms, people out walking, and just, I can't tell you how many people said how nice it is to be able to talk to their neighbors and to be able to see people again. And I think it's important for our community. So once we can get moving on all of those things, I think it's going to be a much better second half of 2021. So again, I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to say hello. I'm looking forward to, in the next few months, getting back out, seeing people around town. At the events, it's a way to really get a sense of the issues that are important to everybody around here. And one of the things that we're looking forward to doing in the next month or two is establishing some outside office hours. So we've talked with Kate at the library, and hopefully we'll start off by setting one up for the South Branch Library, and then we'll do one at the West Branch Library, and then we'll go from there. If anybody would like to get in touch with us, me or staff, the office number is area code 617-722-2676, and my email address is thomas.walsh@mahouse.gov. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for listening.